You're live. This is House Education on April 29th, 2026. The Education Committee is taking a look at S313. This is the bill for studying governance and the other parts of career and technical education centers across Vermont as we sort of prepare for a future state with education funding and education governance. We are inviting to offer some testimony this morning, the head of the Vermont Association of Career and Technical Directors. Eric, welcome. Glad you came to join us and looking forward to your input and your availability for some Q&A on the bill afterward.
Great. Thank you all very much. So I'll launch in. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. For the record, my name is Eric Remmers. I'm the director at Green Mountain Technology and Career Center in Hyde Park. And this year, I'm serving as the president of the Vermont Association of Career and Technical Education Directors, or VACTED. On behalf of VACTED, I want to express our support for the direction of S313 and the work that has gone into the current draft. I also want to be clear at the outset, this bill is not about maintaining the current system as it is. From our perspective, it's about positioning CTE to move toward a more integrated, student-centered model, while making sure we preserve the program, quality, and outcomes that are already working for students in Vermont. There are a few elements in the current draft we see as important steps in that direction. Expanding access, while recognizing that placement needs to align with a student's program of study and meet program requirements, including sequencing and safety, and beginning to bring greater clarity to how those expectations are applied across our system. Preserving program-specific expectations that are critical in technical and safety-driven environments. Framing transportation as a systems-level issue that needs coordinated support. And strengthening the recognition of CTE credits towards graduation requirements. I think it's important to connect those pieces to the broader conversation that's happening right now. Many of the larger changes being discussed, whether that's more integrated delivery models or comprehensive high schools, depend on having alignment around access, transportation, admissions, and program expectations. Without those pieces in place, it becomes very difficult to implement larger structural changes successfully. This bill begins to put that foundation in place. From our perspective, there are still important unknowns, particularly around funding, governance, and system design. This bill allows us to move forward on key pieces while those larger questions are being worked through. From a director standpoint, what matters most is that expanded access results in successful placement. When students are in programs that are a good fit, where they meet readiness expectations and can follow the program sequence, they succeed, complete, and move on to employment or further education. As this moves forward, the key will be how concepts like viable alternative are interpreted in practice, making sure that placement is not just available, but appropriate and feasible for students. And for this to work in practice, the guidance phase will be critical, particularly in clarifying expectations around placement, transportation, and maintaining program quality across different delivery models. We appreciate the committee's work on this and would encourage you to continue moving the bill forward with a focus on how it positions the system for the next phase of work. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions from here.
Great, thanks, Eric. I kind of look at this bill as having three main sections. Or the three main parts. One is there's a lot of intent language, which is, sort of to set our goals and aspirations. Second is asking the agency to offer a number of recommendations to the General Assembly. And it's a fairly large ask. And then there's the working group of legislators charged with sort of I would say solving governance and some other issues, sort of in the meantime, while we are also trying to figure out governance on a statewide scale for all education.
Sure.
Your testimony doesn't really touch on that third part, and didn't know if you had any input on that as well.
So specifically about the work group essentially and where that's taking us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I think was added in a later iteration of the bill, and I think that I think that piece has been I think this bill in and of itself is a bridge to wherever it is that this entire system is going. And I recognize that H955 is creating a lot of that piece, but there also needs to be, I think, a piece that is specifically focused on CTE and how that all connects together. So I think that having a work group that is specifically digging into the details related to CTE, whether that be state board rule. We talked a lot about state board rule and how that could be supported, which it then sort of evolved into AOE guidance that state board rule isn't opened up too early in this whole process. But I think that there needs to be an ongoing sort of group of folks that are looking at where the broader system is going and how CTE connects to that, so that they're not happening on separate tracks and in different directions. And I think some of the conversation up to this point has had both the broader educational system and CTE going on different tracks. And that's what we don't want to have happen, because we need, to this point, CTE has had to meet and fit with the broader system, whether we're talking about funding, whether we're talking about educational access and things like that. So I guess to me, that is just about having some folks that are specifically looking out for CTE and that it's well supported in the broader system.
Sort of figuring out governance of CTE has been discussed for a long time. No one's really been able to coalesce around anything. We've got 3, 4 different styles of governance. We were only able to come up with 3 as we were going through them. I guess there's some skepticism being raised that this is a working group to address this issue, while at the same time we are having, really much bigger discussions about how to integrate all pieces of education together. I would agree much of this is a bridge. I'm just wondering if this working group is trying to bridge something prematurely that will be part of a larger discussion.
That very well may be the case. I think that this working group would likely have to look at all models, not only the 4 working models of district and operations for CTE that currently is in place, but also looking at the single ESA districting model again and what that all looks like, because that would all have to work well within the broader scope of education in the state. And that's where I do think it's important for folks to really be thinking about those things alone and not let CTE get lost in a much bigger conversation. And that's what tends to happen sometimes with CTE. I fully believe we're absolutely critical to, this system and our students in the state and all of that, but we're also relatively small. And so we can kind of get lost in the conversation. And so having a group of people who are really evaluating what makes the most sense for CTE in the context of the broader scheme of things, I think is important.
Yeah, I will say, there has definitely been, over the past 10 plus years, I would say, a renewed, strong emphasis on making sure CTE is well considered in any future discussions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A small question. Okay, the 4 governance models, we came up with 3. We've got private school, independently governed but public, part of a regular old high school or a
supervisory union.
Yeah, school district budget. But we couldn't come up with the 4th.
So that would be what would be the current comprehensive high school model. So for instance, Missisquoi Valley Union has an ag program there. They may have 2 programs, I'm not entirely sure. But those are CTE programs, and they follow state and federal CTE requirements. And I think Canaan, I believe, is the other model for that as well. So you have the public-private, you've got the independent district, you have the members of a supervisory union, and then you have the comprehensive.
Yeah, all right. Great. All right, I've been asking all the questions. Anybody else have any follow-up? Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
Yesterday, we had some questions about what exactly the pre-enforcement intervention pathway is. So a little more clarity around that would be helpful.
Yeah, there was some language questions. That we
Yeah,
had.
what that section-
Absolutely. And this came from a very very preliminary VACTED priority document that we issued very early on in the session. And simply what we were kind of ideating there was, could there be something or someone that supports CTE and high schools in partnering and understanding basic CTE rule, statute, and regulation, essentially revolving around what ends up happening in a lot of spaces is that there is conflict and disagreement over interpretation around rule. And could there be someone or some sort of body that, or person that, or position that could be the step that happens before things are escalated to the AOE level in some sort of like punitive or something manner. We're finding that across our regions, we have very sort of mixed relationships with regional sending high schools. And a lot of that has to do with understanding around CTE purpose, CTE rule, policy, and all of those sorts of things. And being able to sit down, not in a, here's the rule, you need to follow it type of way, but let's come together, let's learn, and let's figure out how we can best support students, I think would reduce some tensions between some of our regional sending high schools and CTE centers. Because there are places that are sticking points. We, recognize that there continues to be work to be done to make sure admissions requirements and things like that with CTE are more consistent across the state. I think that's part of improving access. There are places like what is addressed in this bill around recognition of graduation requirements and credits and things of that nature being transferred back to sending schools, so that not having those credits awarded is not a barrier to students going to CTE. And I think that while the agency itself has really been a support in many ways, the CTE end of the agency is also about state and federal oversight and making sure that everybody is in compliance. And what we sort of ideated was, could there be a mid-step where there is someone or something that is outside of the immediate heated relationship of that regional CTE center and its sending high school that could help facilitate more understanding about what policy and practice is around CTE, so that it does not have to escalate to some of the levels that they have in the past.
Thank you.
Great. And again, that falls sort of in the section of asking the AOE to come up with recommendations for addressing that. We also had a question. There were some questions on grade level competency standards for students in pre-kindergarten through grade 12 related to career exploration and planning that are designed to ensure that each student develops the knowledge, skills, and experiences necessary to graduate with a clear, actionable, and adaptable plan for career and educational next steps. I think where we sort of got hung up was what are grade level competency standards? And I don't know if this was language that you guys came up with or if this is agency stuff.
That was not ours.
Okay.
What it sounds like to me is very similar to what is outlined in the Ed Quality Standards and in Act 77 in relation to career exploration. And I think what they're trying to do is make that a little more intentional, so that CTE has a much firmer foot in the door at those grade levels, at the lower grade levels, so that school counselors, teachers, curriculum, that there's more CTE career-focused curriculum embedded in what's happening there. Whether that would show up in, statewide proficiency standards or things like that, I do not know, but that's what it sounds like to me.
One thing that I often notice is that in so many things in education, transportation is kind of a key factor. Where within the CTE world are we falling short, and how do we correct that?
Great question. And I think that is the topic of a lot of conversation, both in committees and in and amongst the CTE directors. So I think what is happening here is specifically in relation to student access to CTE centers across different regional districts. So the story essentially is that we have centers across our state that go onto wait lists for very popular programs, and there are other centers in our district or in our state that don't have those wait lists, that have openings. And the question is, how do we ensure that students who are not able to access programs that are on wait lists, how do they get to those other centers? Right now, in state board rule, students are allowed to access other centers if that program of interest is on a wait list and another district has that program. There is a mechanism by which they can go to that center. And right now, transportation to that other center is on the student themselves, the student and the families. So, I speaking as a director who has experienced this, there are, I have had a number of students from other regional districts that have chosen to drive to us. But there are also backdoor mechanisms that many of us as directors have figured out to get kids who want to come to some of our programs that aren't offered in those places. So for instance, my district, it borders both the Central Vermont Regional Tech District and the North Country Regional Tech District. I've had students from both come to our school. Some have driven to us. Some have, I'm thinking of one student this year right now who is engaged in our ag program, who gets a ride to one of our bus stops on the very northern end of our district and then is able to hop the bus and then come to our school and go from there. We've done those things sort of like, wheeling and dealing to get those things done. But there, I think, has been a broader concern about what happens when kids don't have easy access to bus stops, when they don't have a car or someone who can drive them to a space. How do we ensure that those students have the capacity to go to another district if they have met admissions requirements for that program? And some, one or two of our CTE centers have chosen to invest in vans and things like that, and hire people to send vans out to pick up students in other areas. But the vast majority of our centers do not have a transportation budget because transportation is not currently a part of career and technical education responsibility. It is the regional sending districts that have that transport students to our center. So this piece is really about what happens when there is a kid who has no means to get to another district, but wants to be in another district, has met the program requirements of that other district. How do we get them there when there's no other means to be there? And I think the previous committee said that, if we're going to do that, then we're going to have to figure out a funding mechanism for how that happens. And that's the discussion, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, the solution basically is it takes money to provide transportation.
Correct.
Yeah, and then I'm in Addison County, and your description of the situation is exactly what we have, and well under enrolled CTE, flanked on either side by CTEs with wait lists.
Right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, none of that changes the actual geography of distance and time.
It doesn't. And so there really is a self-selection process that will happen with students and their interest as to, the distance that they have to travel or the time that they have to travel to go from wherever they live to another center. But I believe the intent of the folks who, articulated this in the bill is to ensure that if there is a student that does want that sort of access, that somehow it is available to them.
Yeah. The other thing that the bill talks a bit about investigating or making recommendations on is embedding more CTE in home high schools. And, that has always created a tension.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I guess, do you have thoughts on how that ultimately gets resolved?
And again,
in many ways, it comes down to transportation. Kids don't want to spend half their day going back and forth when they could potentially get some technical education within their own high school.
Yeah, I think one of the things to remember about CTE is that the outcomes that we have, which are pretty strong outcomes across the state when it comes to career and technical education, is that those outcomes come from depth, not just availability. And so, I think the system needs to ensure that if there are going to be programs that are operating at sending high schools, that they are operating at a depth that allows students to advance into industry credentialing, and that they have the appropriate safety credentialing, and that they, in some cases have the infrastructure to be able to do what, CTE is able to do. I don't think we oppose those sorts of expansions happening, but we want to make sure that when we talk about what we do in say my electrical program, or in our construction program, or things of that nature, that students are getting access to the sort of the equipment, the facilities, the instruction that are specifically tailored to students advancing their understanding towards an industry credential of value that will allow them to walk into the field and be ready to engage in career and or college. There are some, I think, investments that high schools would have to make. And then there are some obligations that I think they would have to think about in terms of federal labor law, and some of the oversight via Perkins and things of that nature that is required of career and technical education. So, by no means opposed. And, I think in regional CTE deserts that some of the other committees have talked about, I think that it can totally make sense. But I would strongly stress that the depth needs to be there for students, and to have those opportunities in those spaces.
Representative McCann.
I hear you. I hear what you're saying about depth, but I also, when I read this bill, I think about expanded opportunities for kids, and they're pretty young when they're starting to make these decisions. And I'm wondering if you had an engineering class that ran for 9th or 10th graders, it's not going to have the depth of an engineering program at a CTE, but it's going to open the door to,
absolutely.
do I like this stuff? Do I like playing with electricity? Do I like building things? So I think we should move in the direction of having some of this in our traditional high schools until we can get to a point where we can have more comprehensive regional high schools where the tech is right there. But I just think that they're making big choices at the time when they're applying as 10th graders. And so anything that we can do for them in advance of that to help them make those decisions would be a benefit rather than.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that at all. When I'm talking about our programming, I'm talking, and this is sort of the based on the framework of my facility right now, is that, we are primarily focused. We do have a 10th grade exploratory program, which is exploratory of all of our programs. But when I'm talking about industry credentialing, college credits, that sort of thing, I'm thinking about our core programming, which is 11th and 12th grade focused there. Absolutely, I think that having early engineering programs, things of that nature, creates a pipeline into a program like ours, which we also have an engineering program. There are mechanisms for that right now. We do. There are pre-tech foundations programs. I would say that across the state, you'll find those being offered through some of our more bigger CTE centers, just because they have a little more resource-wise, personnel and physically. But if high schools themselves were to, do some introductory courses and things of that nature, and that can be tied to CTE in a way that creates and facilitates a strong pipeline to the core programming, I'm fully in support of that.
Other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Case.
Just out of curiosity, you said there are wait lists for some of these programs. What programs are you seeing wait lists for?
It varies regionally, and in some cases it varies year to year. And so I can speak for my center. Green Mountain Tech would be considered a mid-size program in the state, or facility in the state. This year we have about 155, 160 students. And each year it's a little bit different which programs are on wait lists from others. There are some that are more consistent. I would say that our allied health program is one that is consistently on a wait list. That said, 3 years ago, we only had 5 kids in the program, and that was a complete anomaly to us. We had no understanding of why that happened, but now, we have a line out the door for that program. Thinking about where we are for admissions next year, we're on a wait list for our automotive program. We're on a wait list for our electrical program. We're on a wait list, or we're close to a wait list for our forestry program. And we're almost full in many of others, like our creative media program, our engineering program, culinary, those things as well. We do see statewide trends around ups and downs in enrollments. Right now, computer networking and design across the state, both at the college level and at the high school CTE level, has seen a bit of a drop in terms of enrollment and access. And those are trends that we look at both locally and statewide as to why that's happening. So it really does differ by the region and the offerings of a region. So yeah.
I'll describe to you the flip side. So in Addison County, the Career and Technical Education Center has lots and lots of open spaces. It is well under enrolled.
Mm-hmm.
And that's largely due to it has a defined catchment area, as all of them do. That catchment area has had declining enrollment overall of high school students. So they're drawing from a pool of fewer and fewer students.
And that creates a tension with sending schools as well, particularly as we look at some of the provisions of Act 73 and class size. And as schools are beginning to assess, what classes and courses they can run in their home schools. They worry about, the students that they quote unquote lose to career and technical education. So, all of these things sort of interconnect in some way or another.
They do, but ultimately come down to declining enrollment.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So if I want to get into the automotive program that I'm waitlisted, there's the possibility that I won't get into that program at all before I graduate. Is that my understanding that correctly?
Yes.
But There's a chance, yes. It depends on when that student has applied, and it also depends on the makeup of the center and its program. So, for instance, Green Mountain Tech is a full day, full year program. So we have students with us for 6 hours a day within our programs. They get delivered academics, they do their programs, they earn multiple industry certifications, college credits, et cetera. So if a student were to enroll or to apply and be placed on a wait list for the automotive program in their junior year, they would be prioritized for their senior year. That looks a little bit different when we're talking about half-day programs. It looks a little bit different for us if that student is applying as a 12th grade student. We are, and that student has met all of our admissions requirements. We're likely going to prioritize that student as well. So it does come down to individual school policy and practice, but understanding that we are trying to give as many experiences to students as possible.
And it's also law that if that student is on a wait list, but a nearby CTE has space,
Correct.
they can go there. But again, it comes down to transportation.
Right.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say.
All right. Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
One more question around governance and something that you said about the thought of a district seeing kids going to CTE as losing those kids to a CTE center. If the governance structure was such that the CTE was part of the district or part of the regional high school or whatever, do you think that would change the thought? If all the kids were part of the same, then you're not losing anyone to anyone. They're still on the same campus, right?
I think that comes down to the basic discussion of what funding for CTE would look like, right? And so governance and funding at CTE are really touch each other really closely. And so yes, you're absolutely right. If we had one integrated comprehensive high school that served all 5 sending schools, essentially. So the folks of the Lamoille District, the People's Academy, the Stowe, the Craftsbury, and the Hazen, all came to one regional comprehensive high school where career and technical education was embedded through 4 years with, again, depth to have quality, then there would not be an issue with funding. They would all be students of one district. That could conceivably still happen if they went to larger regional districts or supervisory districts, where those 5 schools were also the only 5 people that came to Green Mountain Tech. I think that then the funding that comes to that district, if they were all 5 schools in the same district, there wouldn't be as much sort of give and take in terms of tuitioning and things of that nature. And then, the bigger ESA model, what was initially proposed from the APA study, a year and a half ago, tried to get around that as well by pulling CTE into one district and then having one big mechanism for funding to come to that district so that there wasn't a space where tuition was given at all to career and technical education. It came directly out of the Ed Fund. So there are mechanisms to do that. Right now, our system is one in which the students are tuitioned to our center. And that has been a place that has, caused some conflict in districts around our state. But yes, I think that in a model where everybody came to one space, where all of these things were offered in one space, again, so long as the quality and depth was there, I think it would make absolute sense.
President Quimby.
But on what you said about Act 73 and class size minimums and what programs you can offer, I'm not sure that solves that issue because they would be losing them out of the classroom, perhaps.
But one could.
It might be the funding.
One could make that argument, though. If everybody's sort of within the same umbrella school district,
It depends on how
it's
you
just another
define it.
class offering that competes with other class offerings.
Right.
So that may take care of that.
which
as well.
happens already within a high school, I'm sure.
Right.
Right, and CTE itself has a different mechanism for
Right.
ensuring class size and program offerings, and we have obligations related to Perkins
Right.
around
Safety.
offering specific programs with a certain amount of students, average enrollment per year.
Yeah, so you're operating a full day, full year CTE program.
Correct.
And students are also able to access academic offerings that can help them fulfill their graduation requirements. Can you talk a
Correct.
little bit about
Well, yeah, sure. And again, that looks very different in different places and different centers. We operate so our students are with us from about 8:15 in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The 2 o'clock does allow most of our students to go back to a sending school to take a fourth period class, but we do also offer an embedded English and basically a humanities class. So all of our programs multiple times a week go into this humanities class that ensures that students are getting reading and writing instruction with some civics and history involved in there as well, so that they can carry on graduation credits that way. We, in our model, we also have hired through Perkins a math specialist whose job is to push into our programs and help to design math curriculum that's explicitly taught that's related to that program area or that career area. And so that's our design. Again, we are what I would say a mid-size CTE center in the state. Some of our bigger centers, I'll point to CTE Essex, essentially has the capacity to operate a full embedded high school in that space where, they have multiple specific math offerings or English or history offerings and things of that nature. It really does depend on size and access to resources and things like that impacts how students are engaging in the academic side of things in their programs.
All right. Any other questions? Eric, thanks for taking the time with us this morning.
Sure thing. Thank you all.
As we get
Thank
through
you.
this. Have a great day.
You too.
All right, folks, let's just do a little agenda update so everybody is aware. We were going to work on 214 later, but just because of everybody's schedules, if we were to pass it out today, it would be on the floor Friday when half the committee is going to be gone at a conference or for other reasons, including the presenter of the bill. So we're going to vote on it tomorrow, so it would then be on the floor Tuesday.
Yeah.
So that leaves us with a break from now until the floor at 1. So use your time constructively and pass along any thoughts you might have about upcoming days.
Did you
Yes.
see the email I forwarded you from Hazen?
Oh, yes, yeah, we haven't, they really suggested a date that was quite a bit later.
That wasn't saying they could only do that date,
Right.
they were saying the community lunch was that date. So, if we want to not observe that,
Right.
that's fine.
Yeah. All right, let's, we can talk about scheduling that offline.
Okay.
Okay, great.